The Escape by Katherine Mansfield. It was his fault, wholly and solely his fault, that they had missed the train. What if the idiotic hotel people had refused to produce the bill? Wasn't that simply because he hadn't impressed upon the waiter at lunch that they must have it by 2 o'clock? Any other man would have sat there and refused to move until they handed it over. But no, his exquisite belief in human nature had allowed him to get up and expect one of those idiots to bring it to the room. And then, when the voiture did arrive, while they were still, oh heavens, waiting for change, why hadn't he seen to the arrangement of the boxes so that they could at least have started the moment the money had come? Had he expected her to go outside, to stand under the awning in the heat, and point with her parasol? A very amusing picture of English domestic life. Even when the driver had been told how fast he had to drive, he had paid no attention whatsoever, just smiled. Oh, she groaned. If she'd been a driver, she couldn't have stopped smiling herself at the absurd, ridiculous way he was urged to hurry. And she sat back and imitated his voice, alles weit, and begged the driver's pardon for troubling him. And then the station, unforgettable, with the sight of the jaunty little train shuffling away, and those hideous children waving from the windows. Oh, why am I made to bear these things? Why am I exposed to them? The glare, the flies. While they waited, and he and the station master put their heads together over the timetable, trying to find this other train, which of course they wouldn't catch. The people who gathered round, and the woman who'd held up the baby with that awful, awful head. Oh, to care as I care, to feel as I feel, and never be saved anything, never to know one moment what it was to... Her voice had changed. It was shaking now, crying now. She fumbled with her bag, and produced from its little maw a scented handkerchief. She put up her veil, and as though she were doing it for somebody else, pitifully, as though she were saying to somebody else, I know, my darling. She pressed the handkerchief to her eyes. The little bag, with its shiny, silvery jaws open, lay on her lap. He could see her powder puff, her rouge stick, a bundle of letters, a file of tiny black pills like seeds, a broken cigarette, a mirror, white ivory tablets with lists on them that had been heavily scored through. He thought in Egypt she would have been buried with those things. They had left the last of the houses. Those small straggling houses with bits of broken pot flung among the flower beds, and half-naked hens scratching round the doorsteps. Now they were mounting a long, steep road that wound round the hill and over into the next bay. The horses stumbled, pulling hard. Every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes, the driver trailed the whip across them. His stout back was solid as wood. Those were boils on his reddish neck, and he wore a new, shining, new, strong hat. There was a little wind, just enough wind to blow to satin the leaves, the new leaves on the fruit trees, to stroke the fine grass, to turn the silvery, the smoky olives, just enough wind to start in front of the carriage. A whirling, twirling snatch of dust just settled on their clothes like the finest ash. When she took out her powder puff, the powder came flying over them both. Oh, the dust, she breathed, the disgusting, revolting dust. And she put down her veil and lay back, as if overcome. Why don't you put up your parasol? He suggested. It was on the front seat, and he leaned forward to hand it to her. At that, suddenly she sat upright and blazed again. Please leave my parasol alone. I don't want my parasol. And anyone who is not utterly insensitive would know that I'm far, far too exhausted to hold up a parasol. And with a wind like this tugging at it, put it down at once, she flashed, and then snatched the parasol from him. tossed it into the crumpled hood behind, and subsided, panting. Another bend of the road, and down the hill there came a troop of little women, shrieking and giggling, little girls with sun-bleached hair, little boys in faded soldiers' caps. In their hands they carried flowers, any kind of flowers, grabbed by the head, and these they offered, running beside the carriage, lilac, faded lilac, greeny white snowballs. One arum lily, a handful of hyacinths. They thrust the flowers and their impish faces into the carriage. One even threw into her lap a bunch of marigolds. Poor little mice! He had his hand in his trousers pocket before her. For heaven's sake, don't give them anything. How typical of you, horrid little monkeys. Now they'll follow us all the way. Don't encourage them. You would encourage beggars. And she hurried the bunch out of the carriage with, well, do it when I'm not there, please. You saw the queer shock of the children's faces. They stopped running, lagged behind, and then they began to shout something, and went on shouting until the carriage had rounded yet another bend. Oh, how many more are there before the top of the hill is reached? The horses haven't trotted once. Surely it isn't necessary for them to walk the whole way. We shall be there in a minute now, he said, and took out his cigarette case. And that she turned round towards him. She clasped her hands and held them against her breast. Her dark eyes looked immense, imploring, behind her veil. Her nostrils quivered. She bit her lip, and her head shook with a little nervous spasm. When she spoke, her voice was quite weak and very, very calm. I want to ask you something. I want to beg something of you, she said. I've asked you hundreds and hundreds of times before, but you've forgotten. It's such a little thing, but if you knew what it meant to me. She pressed her hands together. But you can't know. No human creature could know and be so cruel. And then, slowly, deliberately, gazing at him with those huge, sombre eyes, I beg and implore you for the last time, that when we are driving together, you won't smoke. If you could imagine, she said, the anguish I suffer when that smoke comes floating across my face. Very well, he said, I won't. I forgot. And he put the case back. Oh no, said she, and almost began to laugh, and put the back of her hand across her eyes. You couldn't have forgotten, not that. The wind came, blowing stronger. They were at the top of the hill. Oh, yip, 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 cried the driver. They swung down the road, and it fell into a small valley, skirted the sea-coast at the bottom of it, and then coiled over a gentle ridge on the other side. Now there were houses again, blue-shuttered against the heat, with bright burning gardens, with geranium carpets flung over the pinkish walls. The coastline was dark. On the edge of the sea a white, silky fringe just stirred. The carriage swung down the hill, bumped, shook. Yip, shouted the driver. She clutched the sides of the seat. She closed her eyes, and he knew she felt that this was happening on purpose. The swinging and bumping. This was all done and he was responsible for it, somehow, despite her, because he had asked if they couldn't go a little faster. But just as they reached the bottom of the valley, there was one tremendous lurch. The carriage nearly overturned, and he saw her eyes blaze at him, and she positively hissed, I suppose you are enjoying this. They went on. They reached the bottom of the valley. Suddenly, she stood up. Kutcher, Kutcher, arretez vos. She turned round and looked into the crumpled hood behind. I knew it, she exclaimed. I knew it. I heard it fall, and so did you. At that last bump. What? Where? My parasol, it's gone. The parasol that belonged to my mother. The parasol that I prized more than... She was simply beside herself. The driver turned round, his gay broad face smiling. I too heard something, said he, simply and gaily. But I thought as Monsieur and Madame said nothing. There, you hear that. Then you must have heard it too. So that accounts for the extraordinary smile on your face. Look here, he said. It can't be gone. If it fell out, it will still be there. It'll be there still. Stay where you are, I'll fetch it. But she saw through that. Oh, how she saw through it. No, thank you. and she bent her spiteful, smiling eyes upon him. Regardless of the driver, I'll go myself. I'll walk back and find it, and trust you not to follow. For, knowing the driver did not understand, she spoke softly, gently. If I don't escape from you for a minute, I shall go mad. She stepped out of the carriage. My bag. He handed it to her. Madame prefers. But the driver had already swung down from his seat and was seated on the parapet reading a small newspaper. The horses stood with hanging heads. It was still. The man in the carriage stretched himself out, folded his arms. He felt the sun beat on his knees. The head was sunk on his breast. Hiss, hish, sounded from the sea. The wind sighed in the valley, and it was quiet. He felt himself lying there, a hollow man, a parched, withered man, as it were, of ashes, and the sea sounded hiss, hish. It was then that he saw the tree, that he was conscious of its presence just inside a garden gate. It was an immense tree with a round, thick, silver stem and a great arc of copper leaves that gave back the light and yet were somber. There was something beyond the tree, a whiteness, a softness, an opaque mass, half hidden with delicate pillars. As he looked at the tree, he felt his breathing die away, and he became part of the silence. It seemed to grow. It seemed to expand in the quivering heat until the great carved leaves hid the sky, and yet it was motionless. Then from within its depths, or from beyond, there came the sound of a woman's voice. A woman was singing. The warm, untroubled voice floated upon the air, and it was all part of the silence as he was part of it. Suddenly, as the voice rose, soft, dreaming, gentle, he knew that it would come floating to him from the hidden leaves, and his peace was shattered. What was happening to him? Something stirred in his breast, something dark, something unbearable and dreadful pushed in his bosom, and like a great weed it floated, rocked. It was warm, stifling. He tried to struggle to tear at it, but at the same moment all was over. Deep, deep he sank into silence, staring at the tree and waiting for the voice that came floating, falling, until he felt himself unfolded. In the shaking corridor of the train, it was night. The train rushed and roared through the dark. He held on with both hands to the brass rail. The door of their carriage was open. Do not disturb yourself, Monsieur. He will come in and sit down when he wants to. He likes. It is his habit. Oui, madame. Je suis un peu souffrante. Mes nerfs, oh. But my husband is never so happy as when he is traveling. He likes roughing it. My husband, my husband. The voices murmured. They were never still. But so great was his heavenly happiness as he stood there. He wished he might live forever. The book has been put online as part of Build a Book Initiative. Oh, that's the end of The Escape. That's the end of the story. The Escape by Katherine Mansfield. I thought that was a good story. So there's a couple different things I think about when I read. I don't actually analyze the quality of the story when I read. I'm not good enough at reading in order to do that. My reading skills are very poor. The first thing I try to do is I try to say all the words. When I'm reading quietly or when I'm reading out loud, I try to say all the words correctly. That's my number one goal, is to say the words correctly. I know I don't do that all the time. Like I say Monsignor instead of Monsieur or whatever. My first goal is to say the words correctly. And my second goal is to understand what's going on. And I never understand what's going on in stories that I read because my focus is reading the sentence. It's not remembering what happened in the last sentence. See, I don't actually remember what happened in the last sentence. I don't remember the overarching arc of the story. I don't remember any of that because I'm focused on saying each word correctly. When I used to read things for like SAT prep, I would have to read those like 4-paragraph stories you have to read for the SAT prep. What I would do is I'd read the story about 3 times. I'd read it one time, read the story one time, I'd look at the questions, and I'd read the story again. and then I try to find the answers when I read the story a third time for the questions for the SAT prep. Um, Reading comprehension was not the worst skill I was at on the SAT prep. I was actually a lot. Well, I'm actually pretty bad at math too. You know what I mean? I'm actually pretty bad at math in addition to reading comprehension. Um, so, so my first goal when I read these is to say each word correctly, which I know I don't do. I know I don't say each word correctly. I know I do a lot of stutters and stops, and my sentence fluency is not very good, and I don't read it like it's coming out of my brain. I read it like I've got poor reading comprehension skills. But my second goal, but my first goal, I'm a lot better at than my second goal. My first goal is saying each word correctly. My second goal is understanding what's going on and uh, having a clear idea what's going on in the story. And I couldn't tell you what that story was about. All I was doing was reading each word individually. So when I read each word individually, I wasn't. See, my memory skills are so bad, I don't even remember what the last sentence was. So, like, I'll read a sentence and then I won't remember what the last sentence said. Like, I won't remember what the last paragraph, the last 5 paragraphs said. I don't remember any of that because my brain is focused on reading each sentence because I have a learning disability and I'm just focused on each individual word. See, I can read the words, I just don't. It's one of the reasons why I never enjoy reading fiction, or I've never used to enjoy reading fiction. I'm reading short stories on this channel to try to get better at reading fiction, but I can actually read nonfiction okay. I can read history. I can read political science. I can read biographies. My dad used to read a lot of biographies because they used to have those at the library. The library would have a lot of biographies, and my dad would read biographies. And my dad and I both like reading nonfiction. But fiction is actually a lot harder to read for me personally than nonfiction. Um, I'm just more interested in things that actually happen versus things that are made up stories, I guess. But fiction is very important because the art of literature is a more timeless quality than the art of political science or whatever. Literature is important to understanding the world today. So I need to find a way to. I mean, eventually the idea is if I keep doing this, eventually I will learn to remember what happened in the last paragraph and the paragraph before that. But that's just basic memory skills. And so you ask yourself, how do you improve your memory skills? Well, a lot of it, my brain just gets a headache when I try to remember things that are, I just, I get really bad headaches when I try to do things like that, and it's pretty bad. My headaches get pretty bad, and it's a pretty and I've always gotten bad headaches. That's why I've never done well in college or in school or whatever, because my headaches are so bad. And it's hard. It's really hard to try to find a way to make the headaches go away. I find exercise can make the headaches go away. If I do a lot of walking or a lot of running, there'll be a lot of dopamine in my head, a lot of blood rush to my head when I go on a walk or a run. But I need to get my feet stronger before I can walk longer distances. Eventually, I want to be able to walk, run 50 miles in a day or whatever. I do believe that I can get in better physical condition. If I can get in better physical condition, then I can probably get better at reading. Okay, so that's one of my goals is to get in better physical condition so that I can get better reading. Um, it's a tedious process because even when I work a job that is gets me in better physical condition, it's my coworkers would like harass me, or like the customers would harass me, or um, it's most jobs you can get in better physical condition working a difficult job, but the if people are going to be mean to you at the job, then you can't do it. Then you've got to find a job that actually people treat you with respect and dignity, and though you might not get as much of a mental workout from that job, and it's kind of like you don't get as much from that job, but that is what it is. So I'm trying to read these stories to get better at reading. I know I'm really bad at it. People leave comments telling me I'm really bad at it, but that's why I'm doing this, to try to get better at reading. And build a YouTube audience, even though I know it's not entertaining to watch this. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think of The Escape by Katherine Mansfield. Please subscribe to this channel to be part of the community. And please like this video, it really helps the channel out a lot. Thank you for watching, have a good day, bye-bye.